Hey guys, this is John. I'm going to be walking you through AugJS today. And AugJS is a simple, streamlined UI templating framework that I created over the past 3 weeks or so. I spent probably around 30 to 60 hours on this. I can't say for sure. I've actually had a couple dreams about this too, but it's been a blast making and in sort of understanding how UI templating libraries and frameworks like React and Vue.js and Angular sort of work, just scratching the surface, and I've had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, AugJS aims to complete 3 things. It aims to have scoped CSS. So the whole idea of AugJS is that you can write your own little widgets, and you can just bring these widgets from one AugJS app to another AugJS app seamlessly, and you will never have to worry about the styles of one widget colliding with another one because they all have scoped CSS. So if you have the h1 is red in one widget and h1 is blue in another one, this blue one will not override this red one even if it comes on the same page. So an example of that is right here. If you go to the examples, this is an h1 tag with blue, this is an h1 tag with red, and they're both on the same page, and there's nothing that I use to identify them separately. But utilizing a new concept in web development called the shadow DOM, you can see this. Let's zoom in on that. There's this little thing called a shadow root on the aug second and on the aug main. Actually, this whole website was built with aug, so if you just inspect all the code, you're gonna pick up some things that you can do with it. But yeah, so this is all encapsulated within the same shadow root, and you can see that although the h1 of this shadow root, of this hello world right here, is blue, and this one is red, this red one doesn't overlap with blue one, although it usually will. So I think that's awesome. That allows me to keep on creating more of these widgets, bringing them to wherever I need, and making sure that they always look exactly the same. And things like Bootstrap that occupy like a large namespace with all the columns and row and all that stuff, it never collides with my code. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. The second thing that AugJS aims to accomplish is straightforward templating. You can template your user interfaces in 2 ways. You can either use pure HTML or you can use JavaScript. An example of that is right here on this front page. So I'm going to go ahead and inspect this aug content. Actually, it might be even easier if I just went into the code and showed you. So right here in the index.html, I use the HTML approach. So over here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see that I have this aug header tag. It's a custom tag, and I'm passing in an image source with the aug logo, an h1 with AugJS, h3 with a version, and a p tag that says like a little tagline. And what actually happens in the background is that it'll go into the header, that HTML right here. I'm going to split this to the right, and I'm going to show you where this is all being pulled in from. So this aug header pulls in this header template, and using aug, you just connect the template with the tag. So if you look down into the code over here in the main.js, you can see that I just do let header equals, I specify the tag, and then I specify the template, which is this header template, and then I just register the components. So it's just a sort of a 3-step process. You have your custom tag, you have your custom template, and then you have your JavaScript that connects the two. So back into what's going on here. This image is being passed right here. This header is being passed right here. and this h3 is being passed right here. This p is being passed right here. So you can effectively, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this so it's a little bit easier to read. Think of these to match up with these. And this is one way you can template using AugJS. There's this thing called content selectors in the new version of HTML. And what you do is, this is actually built in native. You don't even need AugJS necessarily to do this. But AugJS is a nice wrapper that makes it a little bit easier to sort of connect the two components in the first place when you're importing them in. So it'll go here, it'll select the image tag, and then it'll just plop it right here. So this image tag could actually not even be in this spot, it could be like at the very bottom here. But as long as there's an image tag, it'll plop that image into that content where the selector is the image right here. So what's neat about that is that anybody can really use the templates. You don't need to be very precise. If you have somebody, if you're the designer of the template, you can dictate exactly where all the components go. And all your user, all the person who uses the framework has to do is just put in the content that is expected. It can be in any order, and it can look like pretty much like anything that they want it to look like. All they need to do is edit a couple of the variables that are expected, and it's good to go. So yeah, that's the HTML approach. If I just like remove this image source, then nothing would appear here. Like this would look for an image, it wouldn't find one, so it just would stay empty. No errors would be thrown or anything like that. So yeah, pretty neat. You can see that I keep on doing this down here in the aug content, and if you go, I'm just gonna go, don't save, to the content, let's split it to the right, and you can see that I actually use custom selectors here too. So here in aug content I have a tagline selector, and I actually don't need to touch AugJS for any of this these custom tags. This is actually done all by the HTML templating engine. So I can do the selector for the tagline in my content template, and then I'll just plop in whatever's in this tagline right into here, into that body content. And what that looks like on the site is just that right there. AugJS is useful for sharing your components across projects and building single-page applications, making UI templating a breeze. So really straightforward templating. The HTML is, you don't need to touch JavaScript for this, besides the linking part. And I think that's just super simple and super nice. Okay, so that's the HTML linking part. The JavaScript linking part is a little bit more similar to other frameworks like Vue or Angular, for example. So I'll go over here into the examples, and I'll pop it open over here too. And I'll show you that right here in the index.html, the hello component, which is this hello world component right here, says hello world and has a greetings of 2 plus 3 with 2 plus 3 equals 5 right after it. So what is going on here? So you can see that I have this set of options in my JavaScript when I declare the hello world component that I just made. So this hello world this is the hello world component, this little thing right here. I'm going to zoom in and inspect it just to make it a little bit clearer. And it resides in a tag called augMain. So I'm going to open that up right here on the right, and we can kind of see what it looks like. Oh, there Cool beans. Okay, so inside of this aug main tag, I'll be putting that hello world template. So hello ops, aug main, set ops, hello ops. This might look like gibberish at first, but after you understand just like basically 2 or 3 commands, you'll get it. So right here, I'm creating a new object. So in AugJS, the components are called objects, just a little play on words of aug and object. So an object, you can pass in an element, and this will be the selector aug main right there. So this variable aug will equal a new object with the element of aug main, and then I can set that aug options to equal hello ops. And hello ops has a template variable with an ID and a source, and a data variable with a text and test variables, objects, if you will. So what I'm doing here is AugJS takes in these options. It looks at the template, it puts the contents of the template inside of the tag, and then it looks through any data that you might have. If you have text hello world, for example, then it'll look for anything inside of your template that's inside of handlebars that matches with that variable, so text, and it'll just put it in. And over here I have this test, and it returns a function which returns a string template that says greetings, x plus y equals x plus y. And over here I declared x to be 2 and y to be 3, so 2 plus 3 equals 5. And that's exactly what you see right here. So why would you do this and not just plain HTML? That's a good question, and the main reason you'd want to do something like this over just plain HTML is that this can be dynamic. You can go ahead and do calculations on things that you query in from a database, or you could do things that are automated. For example, if you had like a JSON file or like a CSV file or something like that, you can just do like a for loop through all the entries. You don't need to hand code all of it. It'd be great for that. So yeah, just as an example of that, I'm gonna go ahead and open a browser right here, and let's just go ahead and make a new variable. Let's just call this a lot of stuff, and this will be a function, and I'm just going to make a new variable here. You might see some things that you're not very familiar with, by the way, such as this let keyword and these brackets, and it's basically passing an object as a parameter, right? But why would I do that instead of just passing in just the string? There's a lot of new things that have come out with JavaScript in the last couple of years that have been standardized, and it's called ECMA script 2015 or ES 2015, ES6. There's a lot of sort of words for it. But ECMA script is essentially what JavaScript actually is, and JavaScript is the marketing term for ECMA script. So some of the things I'm using are from that newer version of ECMA script. Although it's been standardized 2 years ago, browsers are still adapting to it today, and I think around last time I checked, 97% of browsers support ES6 now. Though you should still compile down to the older version, just for the percent that uses IE8 or something. Anyways, back to the topic. I'm gonna let stuff equals just a a whole array of things. Let's just do 52, 6, -3, 38, 100. I don't know. I could probably make a function and just have it generate random variables or random numbers or whatever, but that's fine. Let's just do that, and let's just pretend this is like a bunch of. No, let's just do that. Yeah, there we go. Double it, whatever. All right, so we can go over here and say let new stuff or new string equals empty, and then we can do stuff dot for each stuff, and I'll just call it stuffs for each stuff and stuffs. Let's do something like new string plus equals stuff, and then we want to return stuff. All right, so we're going to save that, and we're going to go over here into our hello.html, and inside the span we're going to put in a lot of stuff. Alrighty, so everything broke. Why? This always seems to happen. Okay, so stuff is not defined, and that's because, let's see, oh right, because this is returns new string, right? And there we go. This is the whole string now. This 52, 6, -3, on all of that just concatenated into one thing. And if I wanted to, I could do equals 0, and I think that should, yeah, there we go, 510 is what we get now. Cool. So yeah, that's just one example of what you can use AugJS for. If you just have like a large set of data, and this is pretty small, but I mean, if you just imagine having thousands of entries of data, and you wanted to do that all on the client side, then you can just pass it into a function, like a lot of stuff, and then render that onto the browser without having to touch anything manually. So pretty cool. And of course, you can do this all with vanilla JavaScript too. But the whole idea of AugJS is to be able to modularize different components and say like, I want like there to be a profile component. I want there to be a to-do list component that has a bunch of other small components connected to it and things like that. So yep, that is the idea behind that. I'm going to keep this here, and I'm going to push it later. And something a little bit more complex that you can do with AugJS includes this fancy little div right here that I made just for the express purpose of this demo. And you can see exactly how it's created with AugJS in the Plunker file. You just have to go to the examples, and then you go down here and look at all the code. And it's pretty interesting, I think. There's definitely a lot of things that I still need to add to AugJS in order to make it production ready or more feasible than, say, or like a rival library like React or Vue. And I don't know if I can ever quite get there, but it's going to be fun trying. And I think one of the cool things about making your own framework that allows you to create modularized websites is that you know the framework the best. So out of everybody, so you can do some cooler things with it. And let's just go to crystalfruit.co/cube. You can actually see one of the websites I'm building out of AugJS there right now. This is for my capstone project. You just go to crystalfruit.co/cube. If you don't know, Crystal Fruit is the company I'm president of and front-end lead of. Crystal Cube is the capstone project I'm working on for my senior capstone for computer science. I just built this actually earlier today in a couple hours. So you can just look at the features, try out the beta, sign in with Google, with email, click on that. It'll ask you to sign in with that, and it's going to probably
Hey there, John.
yeah, cool. So this is like just a placeholder model I just found online, plopped it in with Three.js, and then hooked it up with responsive voice. So this will eventually be Crystal, and you'll eventually be able to like talk to her and have her interact with you through it, the API AI agent and things like that. Whole different tangent, but this is all made with AugJS, and you can see that there's this little hash bang symbol up in the URL, and that's one of the features I'm working on right now called Aug Router. And similar to how Angular and React and Vue.js handle routing, I'll be handling routing through this this method too. So it's all one page. You don't need to reload anything. I think it's pretty seamless. Although the site's not complete yet, there's still like a lot of things I need to do. If you go back to the app, for example, without logging in, then it'll look kind of weird. That shouldn't happen in the first place anyways. But yeah. Alright, cool. So that's just some examples of AugJS in action right there. So back to the home page, and I pretty much went over the first two, and the third one, modularized pluggable code, I also went over that. So if I wanted to, I can go into my index.html, and I can literally just copy this aug second, and then change this text to, instead of hello, I can say like, whoa, like that. And then if you reload the page, then you can see right there, this test tag was red, and it's just plopped in right there. Pretty neat. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that because we don't need that. But yeah, so cool. That's pretty much it for AugJS in terms of the main features that I wanted to show you. Let's go ahead and go on Plunker and show you how to create it. I'll be using Plunker as the sort of tutorial like code editor. So if you click on View Tutorials, you'll see the very basic tutorial on how to set up your first AugJS application. So first of all, you're going to have to download the framework. I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste. Actually, I think the one I have right here is a little bit more updated. So I'll copy and paste this. And I'll create a new file. Call it aug.js. And I'm just going to go ahead and whoop right there. Cool. All right, so now that you have AugJS in your application, all you need to do is require it in your HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a script source equals aug.js. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and inspect this as well. Loop. Now I'm going to zoom in a bit so it's a little bit easier to see. Alright, cool. And this is just giving me an error because it wants it to be the body, but I like having my scripts outside of the body personally, although I'm guessing it's sort of a bad practice. But I think it just looks cleaner just having, you know, your body should be where your HTML is, your head should be where your sort of like CSS and so on lie. And yeah, I think I want to move that. Yeah, that's fine. Right there. Okay, cool. So we've imported AugJS, we've downloaded it, put it into our HTML with the script tag, and now we want to create our first custom component. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code, the aug tutorial, and I'm just going to replace that each one with the aug tutorial. So right now it's not going to do anything. I need to create the actual component and then link it. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to copy this tutorial component, new file, and then this can be pretty much anything. I'm just going to call it tutorial.html and paste that. And let's just go over it. just for a quick second, you can see that a component is a template element that has an ID of something. It could be anything really, but the naming convention I've chosen to go with is it should end in a hyphen template, so you can identify it easier. Inside of your template, you can have a style tag, a div, and a script. So over here, I have a style. The content class will have a padding of 20. Let's also change the color to blue, so it's a little bit easier to see when we populate it. And then we have a div with the class content, and it says, "Hello world, this is my first AugJS app," and then a script that console.logs that you're in the tutorial component. Okay, cool. So we have that component set up now, and now we want to import it into our HTML. So we go back to index.html, and then we go ahead and do the import, the HTML import. This is a pretty fairly new concept to HTML, and go ahead and do that. And what essentially it does is it just takes in a target HTML file, and then it brings it into the current HTML file. In this case, the tutorial.html file is being brought into the index.html file. So this tutorial, this is now inside of index.html, sort of. Basically what happens here, and let's see if I can go ahead and find it. Excuse me. Okay, so if you look into the inspect tool on the right, you can see that I have this tutorial header component right here, which is this, and it is an import link, HTML import, and you can see that the you can actually expand it, and inside of it there's that whole thing. There's the template with the tutorial header, the container, the options. It'll have like the AugJS right there, and everything. It's all just right inside of this link. So pretty neat. So yeah, the reason why this doesn't show up immediately is because template tags actually have a special property to them, and that is that they don't appear on your screen until you put them into something. So that's handy. Let's go back over here. That's pretty handy. So we can import in the template tag, and it won't appear until we just link it up. So we'll go over here into the new code, and then we're going to go ahead back into our index.js, and then plop in this code right here, and there you go. There it is, connected. I'm gonna go ahead and go over what each of these lines of code do. So first, we create a new aug variable. This can be let, or it can be var. It's pretty much whatever, really. I don't know if const is something that you really want to do, because aug kind of changes over time. Just dropped my water bottle. But yeah, so you have a variable. This could be like app or whatever. I just named it aug, equal to a new aug. And aug is where your application is rooted at. So what that really means is aug is sort of like, well, it's not exactly where it's rooted at per se, but it's the main sort of function that you use to manage all of your other objects, aug components, if you will. So yeah, we'll get into exactly what it does in just a second. So we have a new object called tutorial, and we have this tutorial object equal to an object that contains an element key and an ops key. The element key is equal to a value called augTutorial, which is this right here. And then in the options, we specify a template, and then we specify an ID of the template and a source of the template. So you can, if you notice in this this link, this import link, I gave it a name of tutorial component, and this tutorial component is what is used to connect with this source right here. If you don't have a template.source, then it'll try to look in the current document, and the current document doesn't have it. It's inside of this particular document, inside of this tutorial.html. So that's where you want to sort of point it at. Inside of here, we have an ID, which is tutorial template. Let's see if I can go back to that tutorial template right there. So we have that. So it takes in all that information, and then all you need to do with that is call aug.registerComponent tutorial, and then it'll link them together. It'll link this aug tutorial right here with this template right here. And then I can just copy and paste this aug tutorial a bunch of times if I want, and then I'll just make a bunch of them. Ha ha ha. Alright, cool. So that is the absolute basics of starting your first AugJS app. But let's just say you want to get a little bit more in detail. So let's give the HTML thing a shot. So over here, I'm going to do h1, and I'm going to make this h1 say yo. It didn't pop up. And why is that? And the reason for that is because AugJS actually overwrites what's inside of this tag, sorta, kinda, using the shadow DOM. So I'm going to go ahead into the tutorial.html, and we're actually going to just select that now. So over here, I can do content select equals h1. And it'll only say yo now. Interesting. But what happens if I remove this? Then it'll go back to what it was before. Pretty neat. So what you're doing here is HTML templating using AugJS. This is basically a really fancy or a really light, sugary wrapper around the HTML templating that already exists through the JavaScript connecting of the components with the template. So all I'm doing right here is I'm saying that inside of this h1 tag, try to find an h1 tag in this awk tutorial that matches or that exists. And if it exists, then replace whatever's in here with whatever was in there. Otherwise, just put in this as the default text. So this is great because if you're a template creator, you can just create your regular template, and all the user has to do is they just have to go into the template and look at all the selectors, and they just know where things go just because all the default values are already filled in. So yeah, pretty easy there. One thing I actually have not tested is if this works with CSS and stuff like that. I don't think it does. So let's just try like a red, for example. This is completely unknown to me right now. Style equals content. Yeah, this is not gonna work. This is not gonna work. Equals h3 content. No, that's not gonna work. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Or color. Yeah, I have no idea. That would be really interesting if that worked. But you know what would work in that situation, and it's not HTML templating, but it's JavaScript templating. So let's get into that right now. So over here, I can actually set the style equal to color. And this color can be red, right? So this will turn red. But let's just say I wanted the user to pick the color. So I'll just have color is color. This is going to throw an error because it's not detecting any color variable in the data that's being passed through. So we're going to go back to the index.html, and we're going to add a data variable in our ops, and we're going to give it the color of let's just say green. And there you go. Cool. That's pretty much it. So with JavaScript templating, you can use the handlebars, and you can insert it literally anywhere that is inside of the template, and it'll just replace whatever is inside the handlebars with the corresponding data value. But it will throw an error if you don't have that data value. Probably will be like patched in a future update ways down, so that even if you don't have the value, it'll let you keep on going. But for now, it's not going to let you keep on going, just because it takes a lot more work just to do all that checking. All right, so here we have an empty data variable, and here we can actually do the math that I was talking about before, like 2 plus 3, and it'll give me 5, and that's all neat and everything. This is just dynamic JavaScript evaluating on design time. You obviously, I don't see why you would let your users interact with this too much, but yeah. So this is another feature. We could also just put in color here, and this would just print out here too, like that, green. And then we can do other things like continue adding data points and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's essentially most of AugJS in a nutshell. There's a lot more cool things you can do with it, but you'd have to go deeper into JavaScript in order to sort of get the gist of it. So sort of to wrap up, I'm going to go over the documentation really quick, and then leave the ES6 shadow DOM and the custom card tutorials for another video. So let's go ahead and go through the documentation. So there's two main classes right now. There's the Aug class and there's the object class. So let's just go here and loop and loop. And also this plunker, I will save it. And this is where you can go to access it. If you would like to pause the video and give that a shot. Or let's see if I just do that. Yeah, there you go. Cool. All right, so time to go through all the documentation. So first class is the Aug class. This is the Aug class right here. If you're not familiar with ES6 classes, they're just like what you would do in ES5. You'd have like some sort of like var Aug equals an empty object, and then you'd have a bunch of like things inside of it, right? So just think of it like that. It's just a fancier way of doing it that looks more familiar to somebody from an OOP background, an object-oriented programming background. All right, so this class Aug has a constructor, and when you create a new Aug, so I did something like var Aug or var app equals new Aug, this is going to call the constructor right here, and it's going to set this .auglist to an empty array. So then if I did something like console.log app.auglist, that would be equal to an empty array. Okay, cool. So what does the auglist do? The auglist contains an array of objects, and objects are simply the components that have like the element and all the options, like the template, the source, and all the data points and stuff like that. And there's a getter for the component list. It's just get component list, return this .auglist. And you can just do something like var, or just pretend we have that app back, app.componentList. And then if you did like a console.log of this, then that would return the array of objects. In this case, it'd still be an empty array because we haven't added anything yet. All right, but in order to add something to your auglist, you would call the register component method. And the register component method takes in two main parameters. It actually takes in one object and expects that object to have these two parameters in it. And it's the L parameter and the ops parameter. And you saw that before right here as the let's see, back to maybe the docs has it here. Yeah, there we go. So let docs equals L docs ops and template data. Okay, cool. Okay, back up here. And it'll take this element and it'll create a new object, with the L and ops that you pass in, and then it'll push that new object to the auglist. And we're going to get into what objects do in just a second, but really quick helper function is register component with an S, and this uses the rest spread operator to take in a variable number of components that you pass in, and then for every component it'll just call that register component function and expects every component to have an L and ops parameter in the object. Okay, next function we have here is setAug. Manually set the options of a target object. So you can pass in some L and ops that you want to set the aug of something of, and then you go ahead and just set the options of a target object to the new options. So that'll go through the auglist. It'll compare every object in the auglist to the element that you want, and then if it matches, then it'll just set the ops to the new ops. So this is useful when you want to, for example, change the page or something like that. So if we go over here, I'm actually doing a set ops on the page, and this middle section right here is changing according to those options. So the options here might be like template ES6. This one might be template shadow DOM, template lit, and so on and so forth. Okay, cool. And then lastly, we have this component method, and it takes in a single string, an element, and then it just looks inside of your auglist and then returns the object that it finds, if any. Okay, cool. So I pick my water bottle back up and take a sip. Looks like it's been 40 minutes already, or so. So I'm going to try to keep the rest of this pretty short. Object, same dealio here. Expects a element and ops parameter within the object that's passed in. And if it doesn't find any, then it'll just assume that it's an empty object. It'll set the aug name equal to the element that's passed in, element string, and then it'll set its own like list of augs. So AugJS to find augl with element. So what this does is, let's just say I had aug-second, and then I just had a bunch of those. This would find all the instances of that element tag, and then put into an array, and then it will set this.augs to that array, so that you can manipulate all of the same tags at the same time if you wanted to. And then let's see, then it would set the ops to the ops, and set ops is the function that involves the shadow DOM. The shadow DOM is really straightforward. Over here you can see that set ops expects an ops object, an object with ops in it. It lets the template equals find template with ops, and what this function does is it just finds a corresponding template with the options that were passed in. So if it was options.template.id equals hash tutorial template, then it would find that tutorial template within the source, which is like tutorial component. And once it found that, it would return that to this template. Then for all the augs and the augs that match, and all the elements that have the same element selector, like aug-tutorial, we're going to let a temporary variable called shadow equal undefined. And we're going to check every element to see if it has something called a shadow root. Shadow root is something that not every element has until you add a shadow root to it. So we're going to check if it already has a shadow root. If it doesn't already have a shadow root, then add a shadow root. If it does already have a shadow root, then just keep it. And then what we do is, if there was an option called preserve, then we just set the shadow equal to the template. So the shadow is sort of like div within the div. So you have like the aug-tutorial div, and then inside of there, usually .inner.html will change whatever is right there. So it'd be like that tag. Let's see if I can just do it here. aug-tutorial. aug-tutorial. And if I did something like aug-tutorial, like if I had some kind of let aug-tutorial equals document dot get element by ID or a query selector, aug-tutorial, and then I did something like .inner.html, right, equals hey, and over here you'd expect this inner.html to equal hey. But in the case of shadow DOM, there's actually another sort of thing inside of it, and it's the shadow root. And inside of the shadow root, it's sort of like its own mini thing, own mini DOM. And inside of this shadow root, it sort of just like obeys its own rules. It's a rebel, so to speak. So you'll plop in all the template HTML goes here, template stuff goes here, and then that's sort of that. So that's if it does have the ops preserve. If it doesn't, then that means we're going to be passing it through the handlebar parser, which will just replace anything inside of the handlebars with like whatever the data is, equals whatever test returns. So yeah, anyways, let's go ahead and get rid of that. And the parse handlebars function will return just a string. When you set the shadows inner HTML to that string, then the shadow root will be updated to that, and it will be passed as HTML into it. So that might be a little bit confusing, but sort of the more you play with Shadow DOM, the simpler it gets, and you just realize that it's just a div within a div that obeys its own rules, sort of, kind of, sort of. All right, so next method is find augl. This is pretty straightforward. It just finds elements on the page that match with the element that you pass in, and that's pretty much it. Find template. This is also pretty straightforward. It just looks at the template ID and source, and it looks into the source for a template with ID. If it finds it, it brings it back. Otherwise, it just reports an error. Okay, so select. Finds an element with the L selector, and this is basically what the find augl is, but this is just for like a sort of general purpose usage. So this is, you'd use this instead of the query selector, because there's this whole, if there's an element, then return it. If ops exists, then look at a template source and things like that. All right, and there's another function called import select template. Finds all elements with an import with the element selector. This will look inside of a link with that is an import link with the name of the template source, and then it'll just do the query of the ID inside of that link. And if it finds a template with that ID inside of that source, then it'll return it. Otherwise, it just returns an error. This whole parse handlebars function just goes through, looks for any handlebars, and then evaluates what's between the handlebars with a bunch of like if-else sort of things, and some sort of data checking just to make sure it works. This is all custom coded, so I don't know if it's efficient or not, but it works, sort of. So it works for really, really simple use cases, I should say. It does crash for like sort of more complex things, like if you're trying to do like a for loop and then like return a bunch of values, you need to make sure you return it as like one value, so it doesn't return like accept mapping and things like that yet. But that's all down the pipeline of things that I want to do with AugJS, because I think it's really cool learning all that stuff. And then last two functions, that was the end of object. These are two helper functions. One function is just is function, and just takes in a thing and just asks, just returns if the thing is a function or not. And then there's the arrow swap function, which replaces all the left or less than and greater than escaped characters with the appropriate symbols. And the reason why arrow swap is a thing is because I wanted to do if-else statements within my handlebars. And I realized that whenever I did if-else statements, the less than and the greater than would always swap out with the and LT semicolon and GT semicolon. So I just made a little function that swaps those out. And yeah, that's pretty much AugJS all right there. And then aug routers being set up right here, but none of the actual code has been put in here yet. There's actually, if you look in the I think it's the tutorials, right? You look in the tutorials code, then you're gonna see this doodad at the very bottom. If window.location.hash switch window location hash case hashbang AugJS, hashbang ES6, hashbang shadow DOM, hashbang lit, aug.component, aug.tutorial.set ops to their respective ops. This is sort of what you can expect for the aug router when that goes into sort of like a production sort of state. Right now it's just something I'm exploring. So over here I did like ES6 and shadow DOM and stuff. The page changes, right? And the URL, the hashbang slash shadow DOM lit ES6 AugJS, that all changes. And actually, if you just like refresh the page, it'll go right to that section, and that's using some of the code that I have back here. So routing is basically almost done. I just need to test a few things before I actually put it into the actual router and then make a actual factory out of it. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's AugJS. I think I've spent somewhere between 30 and 60 hours on it these past few weeks, so I might be missing a thing or two. It's been kind of a blur, but I've had a lot of fun building it. And it's not a whole lot of code, but if you look into like the old code, for example, this was like 21 days ago. I have like I think like 6 iterations of the code. The v0.6.1 is what that stands for. And each iteration I kind of like did it differently. Like this iteration I used strict. I had this prototype stuff going on. I had like this stuff this was all fine and dandy. I can just show you it right here. Source 3. And this page was also built using AugJS version 0.1. I guess you could call this 0.3 if you want to be better with the name convention. And this was my original tutorial, but then I was completely dissatisfied with it and decided to go with ES6. So glad I did it. ES6 is a lot better than the current version of JavaScript. Makes things so much easier. And it just looks really pretty and succinct now. The code, I can work with it and not be kind of disgusted by it. And plus the website looks better. I got my design act together and made all these logos and stuff like that. So yeah, there's that. The rest of the documentation will be coming soon, TM. With the examples also coming soon. Let's see, I think this works right now for a tutorial video, but I'll have some follow-up tutorial videos on ES6, Shadow DOM, and the lit custom card that I made, which was this thing right here. Alright, awesome. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.